Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of MUFG in Conversation, our video series dedicated to exploring timely topics through discussion with key industry leaders in the innovation ecosystem. My name is Priya Rajan. I'm the Managing Director responsible for national VC coverage and BizDev efforts at MUFG Tech Banking Group. Today, I'm very excited to welcome dear friend Sandesh Putnam. He's Managing Partner at Premji Invest US. Prior to Premji, he served as Venture Partner at DFJ Group. Premji Invest is a crossover fund, multifamily office specializing in private equity and venture capital investments. Strong presence in both India and Menlo Park. The firm invests in mid to late stage growth companies with a focus on technology, consumer, fintech, and healthcare sectors. Thanks again for joining us, Sandesh. Let's dive right in. It would be great to hear from you more about Premji's Evergreen Fund, your investment theses, and your interest in sectors and geos.
Thanks, Priya. Appreciate you having me here. Excited to participate in the inaugural, series here. So happy to provide insights as much as we can. So Premji Invest is a captive fund to an endowment. The endowment was set up by Mr. Azim Premji, who's the founder and chairman of Wipro. Mr. Premji had decided many years ago that he wanted to give away pretty much all of his wealth to charity, and focused on a specific mission, which is enhancing primary education in developing countries. So the endowment is basically been set up in effort to fund the foundation's activities. Premji Invest is the captive fund for this endowment, and our job is essentially to, hopefully over a period of time, to be able to, multiply the corpus of capital that we manage, so that the foundation's activities can be supported in perpetuity. And so we take a differentiated approach. When you think about endowment, people think of investing across multiple asset classes. They think about investing through other managers. All of the capital that Premji Invest manages is managed by the team here at Premji Invest, directly investing through our teams, both here in India as well as in the US. We take a more concentrated approach. We are 100% equity shop, as I like to say it. About 30 to 40% of our capital is in the public markets. We run a fairly concentrated long biased portfolio, both here in the US as well as in India. And on the growth equity side, we typically like to invest in companies where we feel like these companies have achieved product market fit. And the flip side of the same coin would be that these companies can build enduring value. So we want to support the companies through their entire journey, post product market fit, all the way through an IPO and beyond. And because we run a contiguous fund, both public and private, we're able to, sort of help the company not just through the initial phases of their scaling journey, but also in their life as a public company, and hopefully continue to add value. Thematically, as you can think about it, we are pretty broad. We are in tech, we are in consumer, we're in healthcare, we're in financial services. And because we're able to peer across both markets, India is a proxy for all of the emerging market dynamics, and the US is a proxy for an evergreen economy that constantly reinvents itself. There's lots of learnings that one can think about, both in terms of the durability of a business model, as well as specific ideas that have truly scaling capacity. And we hope to bring those insights when we think about investments, both here in the US as well as in India. And I think within those sectors, we tend to think of it as, prepared mind strategy. We tend to be fairly thematic. We spend a lot of time understanding the ecosystem. We do a lot of calls with industry experts. We have a pretty wide portfolio. So obviously polling our executives to see where the disruptions are coming from. And the goal for us would be that we would be able to invest across these themes. And these themes are ever changing, as you can imagine, and support the companies through that journey.
That's awesome. And how big is the team here in US?
So we are 15 investment professionals here in the US. The India team is considerably larger. We do more things in India than what I described. We have an early stage practice there as well, where we're investing in companies that are a little bit early in their journey. And we have, think of it a majority business, where we have some sponsored situations where we are a majority owner of some of these businesses as well. So the team in India is much larger and expanding, and the team in the US is 15 investment professionals.
Over time, over time. With that said, I think just double clicking on the crossover approach of what you do across public and private companies, given the current climate, is there any shift in your strategy between how you want to lean in, which way? Like, is it maybe earlier stage more than later stage now? Or in other words, has your interest kind of changed now versus what you did maybe like 2 or 3 years ago?
No, I think our strategy sort of, is peering through time in many ways. So
Mm-hmm.
we tend to not be as reactive to near-term cycles.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, it's you have to marry strategy with tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And there are opportunities in many cases, probably more lucrative on the public side for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there are things on the growth side that present a better sort of risk reward scenario in other times. But I think from a business mix perspective, I don't think that has changed much for the last 10 plus years for us. That said, when you think about growth or crossover investing, we're always looking for durable businesses, right? So these are businesses that can, obviously, with some cyclical, headwinds or tailwinds, can kind of go through them. So the idea is that, are you picking the right sort of durable business models that have truly secular trends?
Mm-hmm.
That you may on the margin see some slowdown, but the reality is that you can probably grow through those cyclical headwinds or tailwinds. And in many cases, even the way we think about our public portfolio, our underwriting really doesn't change that much. So we're thinking of companies even on the public market side that can 3 to 4x their market cap over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Our underwriting process is fairly similar when it comes to growth investing as well as public markets. Now, there are some things that we can do on the public market side that, in a weird way, that allows us to have a sort of I would say, differentiated view, especially because we're looking at a lot of the disruptors, right? So in some ways, we can see what's coming down the pike, and that informs how we build our portfolio as a result. And similarly, on the private side, since we see a lot of public companies that not just go public, but also thrive in the public markets. And now it's an easy statement to make, but there are a lot of nuances to it, right? You think about business model, you think about product, you think about the people, you think about how they talk about their business, you think about the specific metrics that the street cares about, and how do you message all of that? We understand that, I think, in a fairly nuanced way.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at, growth investing or earlier stage, we're able to apply some of these things. Obviously, not every business is created alike, so there's some nuances. But that said, I think we can really help both the management teams as well as the way we think about these companies, really bridge that journey, right? All the way from, when they feel like they have product market fit to when they go public and thrive in the public market. So I think to your broader question, I don't think our strategy changes much
Mm-hmm.
with sort of change in macro conditions, but tactics can change a bit in the near term.
Where do you see and how do you see the founders should adapt or evolve in this post-unicorn phase that are different compared to kind of early stages of company building of scale?
So Priya, I think for us, right? So I think the key metric is, do you have good unit economics?
Mm.
So you can sort of maybe peel that a bit, right? So let's say, what does unit economics mean? So it's people talk about sort of acquisition costs related to the lifetime value of that customer.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe in the earlier stages, because you're still discovering what lifetime would look like, you may have a metric around customer acquisition costs that might be a little bit more lax, lack of a better word, right? So you can marry that with macro as well, and I'll come to it. And so the initial stages of the journey, you're probably just trying to acquire customers as opposed to thinking about the lifetime value. But as you go through that scaling journey, if you don't have positive unit economics, that really impacts durability of the business, right? So it either is sort of an indicator of pricing power, it's an indicator of competitive dynamics, it's an indicator of a lot of different things. It manifests itself in a CAC to LTV metric that we care a lot about. When you think about LTV, people think about break even, right? So if I'm acquiring the customer and I'm willing to pay, say, 1 year worth of contribution margin or 2 years worth of contribution margin or 3 years, depending on the macro conditions, that metric can change quite dramatically in a changing macro. If cost of capital is relatively zero, then maybe I'm willing to spend a couple of years worth of revenue. I know this sounds egregious to acquire meaningful customers, but the CAC to LTV matters a lot, right? And then in a changing interest rate environment, the cost of capital changes quite dramatically. my CAC to LTV is a little bit more constrained because I'm not willing to spend 2 years worth of revenue or contribution profit, or how you want to think about it, to acquire a customer, because that capital is very, very expensive. So when you think about the scaling journey and apply that to sort of the macro conditions, it's very, very critical to have positive CAC to LTV and to keep dialing that, because I think to create a durable business, you have to have a positive unit economics. And you can't have a situation where I'm going to come in and say, I'm going to buy this business or buy this customer, and the LTV or the CAC for that is 3 years worth of contribution profit or 4 years worth of contribution profit. And it's a relatively young company, right? So how do you know what the true lifetime is when it's only a 6 or 7 year old company? So I think the thing that to focus on for founders and entrepreneurs in their scaling journey is to ensure whatever the stage is, after you get the initial set of customers and you've established product market fit, you've got market pull, products well established, is to ensure that you dial the business appropriately such that you have positive unit economics. It matters a ton for us.
We'd love to hear your point of view on kind of why generative AI, and where do you see kind of innovation happening for the next few years?
Look, I think the seminal moments in AI are happening at such a rapid clip.
Yeah.
Maybe what I said to you last week may not apply this week, or what I said to you a couple of hours ago may not apply this hour. Because I think what is consistent across this is the speed of change.
Yeah.
And the speed of adoption. Now, if you go back and think about some of these compelling platform shifts that have happened historically, whether it's the advent of the internet and the browser, the shift to mobile, shift to the public cloud, and a lot of the situations, I would say the incumbents were kind of hedging their bets. If you think of the larger companies, they would say, well, we have proprietary data, we're going to be on-prem. Mobile is kind of a hobby. Most of the work gets done on a desktop. Microsoft is famous in terms of talking about what the internet is all about, and missing the whole browser thing initially. So I think this is unique in the sense that AI is actually in many ways being adopted and driven by the mega large caps. And very quickly, we've seen that the opportunity set for startups is shrunk quite a bit. So if you think about it from the perspective of the broad LLMs, the horizontal LLMs that are so pervasive today, our view is that this is largely a game played by a few and not by the many. The infrastructure layer is the place that's interesting. The application layer for us is also a question mark, mostly because if you make the assumption that the amount of data you have under management is critical in producing insights, especially in enterprise use cases, then the larger the data set, the more likely your insights are better. The application layer, people talk about co-pilots and things of that nature, but I just don't think that that's probably a stopgap thing in my mind. Our view is that it is kind of what is expected of the main app over time. So I'm not sure there's that much pricing power in the application layer. But the bridge between, say, a very broad horizontal LLM and the application layer, I think that is very wide. And there's a lot of value capture that needs to happen over the next 5 or 10 years in just that middle layer. Because I think if you think about tooling or infrastructure in general, set for the prior platform, it's not an easy, add-on. You have to think about it, first principles, whether it's security, whether it's storage, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's, even what we see from hyperscalers. So I think I'd say our thesis is ever evolving. That is our view. But I think from a hype cycle perspective, look, I think like all things, we went through the last 4 or 5, 6 months, I'd say, was sort of peak of the hype. I think that is tempering a bit, mostly because I think that the big sort of seminal sort of I've just discovered AI things have come and gone. But I'd say it's something like this. I think in the very near term, I'd say we are probably overestimating the impact of all things AI, right? Think of it as 2, 3, maybe even in the next sort of 4 years. But in the really long term, I think we're really underestimating the true impact. So overestimating in the near term and underestimating the long term. And I think in a weird way, it plays into the hands of longer term investors, right? So we can see the horizon. ways, or take a longer view of where the horizon is.
That ties back to, when you were saying concentration of innovation, or maybe specifically on the AI innovation side of it in the major players. Does that also mean maybe there's an exit environment for some M&A opportunities for some of these smaller companies that they've helped build to scale to a certain level, and that just means that could provide themselves a better opportunity for M&A versus a traditional IPO route?
Too early to tell, to be perfectly frank.
Yeah.
I think that
that's fair.
Yeah, and I think it's, if you look at, there's two different models, right? If you look at, just talent acquisition, early days of Facebook and early days of Google, a lot of the acquisitions that they made were small, and they were largely talent and maybe a few product features.
Mm-hmm.
Probably Amazon took a slightly different approach. Maybe it wasn't as acquisitive, and took sort of embracing the open source community for that. It's TBD, right? So there's a lot of stuff happening in the open source domain today. They could be monetized in different ways. And I think that it's hard to say, which way it's going to go. But it is an environment that it's going to lead to dislocations that are hard to fully predict, which also means that, there is probably room for more M&A. I can't comment on, the size or this or sort of the frequency with which we experienced, early part of this decade or last decade.
Yep. It's early at this moment to tell for sure. On the IPO front, really quick is, of course, we have seen few IPOs already out in the market. Of course, mixed kind of a performance. With that said, there's few more that's coming out. What does that mean? How do you see this as a trend that impacts kind of the broader IPO landscape, potentially in the next Q4 or follow on for Q1, and even performance, the folks who are potentially going to be out there and or the performance for those companies? Again, it's a very high level prediction from you.
Oh man, predictions are tough. I'm going to be wrong as soon as I say it. But I'd say this isn't the grand opening that some people had hoped for. Or I think the buy side of the public markets is telling you that I don't think we've gotten to a spot where we are going to take on more risk, right? So that's one thing. But that said, each of these IPOs in themselves had some very specific things that one needs to look at. But, each of these individual companies have their own story to tell.
Of course.
But in many ways, I think the Q4 IPOs probably that are in the cards, I think the performance was okay, and I think they're going to push through. But it definitely has an impact on companies that were planning to do something in the early part of next year, because those are early processes. And so the board discussions will be a little bit more measured. And if they haven't gone through the process and well down the pipe, they probably will stall those things. So I'd say, mixed is the right way to think about it.
And just to wrap it up, one piece of advice that you would give to founders that are listening to today, as you see companies make through the scaling, as we were talking about, how should they be thinking about growth and building for success long term?
Yeah, I think if you make the assumption that there is going to be a cost of capital, whatever that is, unlike the last sort of, say, 15-year cycle where, the cost of capital was practically zero. Yeah. You have to look at, growth and think about profitability about the same time. And some businesses may take a while to get the unit economics right, as well as sort of, if you think about fixed and variable costs to cover the fixed costs so that you can actually make a profit. We understand that dynamic. But at the end of the day, I think growth at all costs has come and gone, and maybe the next bull market you may come back to it. But if you think about creating a durable franchise, you really need to think about making sure that you balance the two. So profitable growth is sort of what the mantra should be. Whether it's at 10, 20, 30, or even a few $100 million, I think it matters a lot going forward.
Great advice. Thanks again for your time, Sandesh, for joining us and sharing these incredible insights. And thank you all for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for having me.